What you're about to hear isn't a routine space briefing. Beyond the scope of any terrestrial telescope, something took place. Scientists have been forced to reevaluate their assumptions regarding how interstellar encounters ought to look and behave as a result of this baffling event. Decades after its launch, a spacecraft we assumed had drifted quietly into oblivion may have stumbled into a conversation no one expected to overhear. Voyager 1, launched in 1977 to study the outer planets, and then, sent on into interstellar space, is suddenly at the center of a story that sounds like science fiction. It would appear that the probe was involved in an effort to align with an object that was not only outside our solar system, but also possibly foreign, in a sense that goes beyond just its origin. The questionable object is 3Y/Atlas, the third confirmed visitor from another galaxy catalogued by modern sky surveys. This newcomer, in contrast to previous visitors such as Borisov and Oumuamua, arrived larger, faster and stranger. It was first picked up in July 2025, racing through our neighborhood at speeds that made astronomers sit up and recalibrate their expectations. Then, somewhat unexpectedly, a number of independent sources began reporting that NASA had reactivated some directional sensing capabilities on Voyager 1 that had been dormant for some time. Since Voyager hasn't had usable propulsion in decades, its pointing and instrument calibration systems were repurposed to observe a specific region of space precisely where 3I/Atlas would pass through. If true, this would mark the first time a human-made interstellar probe tried to passively line up with an object from another star system. Not to collide, but to listen and record. And the timing was, to some, unsettlingly exact. A few days after the window in which Voyager might plausibly have detected distant signatures from the object, Earth's magnetosphere reacted in ways that didn't match ordinary solar activity. Instruments registered spikes and ripples in electromagnetic readings that were consistent with directed energy phenomena, but not originating from Earth. A response that bounced outward toward deep space was suggested by the orientation and frequency of those disturbances. People inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory have reported unusual noise patterns captured by Voyager's instruments, but NASA has declined to officially confirm any link between those magnetospheric anomalies and Voyager's activity. These were not produced by the random hiss and static of cosmic background radiation. They had structure and order that scientists simply could not attribute to known stellar processes. This is the central terror of the episode. If 3I/A TLAs weren't inert, Voyager couldn't have recorded a signature that clear and structured. Not just a tumbling chunk of ice and rock, but a reactive body capable of producing and directing its own electromagnetic footprint. Something that, listens and replies. Voyager 1 left Earth with equipment designed for a different age. It was built with a high-gain antenna and transmission protocols that allowed it to return images and telemetry from Saturn and Jupiter. Those systems were never expected to survive intact into the 21st century. However, many essential subsystems continue to function. Over the years, engineers have secretly confirmed that they have pushed instrument presets and aligned receivers with new observation targets by issuing minute recalibration pulses. However, when leaked logs suggested that a transmission aimed at 3I/Atlas might have produced a structured return, the narrative took a dramatic turn. Symmetric periodic bursts far too regular to be random noise. Imagine sending a simple ping into the void and hearing back a rhythm that doesn't fit any known astrophysical pattern. Could it be encoded information, a form of data, language, or was it simply a fluke so elaborate it defied reasonable coincidence? Whatever the explanation, the effect on scientists was unmistakable. Sleepless nights and harried meetings. Dig deeper, and the story becomes stranger still. Ancient civilizations across the globe, the architects of Machu Picchu, the builders of Baalbek, and others oriented monumental architecture along celestial alignments. Some researchers noticed that certain solstitial axes matched, with uncanny precision, the entry trajectory attributed to 3I/Atlas. The odds of such a correlation occurring by sheer chance are astronomically low. An unsettling outline emerges when you add the myths of numerous cultures that speak of visitors, or wandering lights, moving differently than planets or comets, briefly appearing before returning. Is it possible that humanity encountered interstellar visitors before, and encoded their paths into stone and ritual? Could those patterns, created thousands of years ago, align with a modern object that arced into our skies in 2025? For some, scientists, the idea is chilling not because it proves a particular theory, but because it suggests a continuity of encounters that our textbooks and telescopes never anticipated. 10 days after the proximity window, where Voyager might have picked up signals, an anonymous data packet appeared on an encrypted server, frequented by astrophysicists and SETI researchers. The package, signed only with the codename Etcheraction 67, contained raw waveform sequences, purportedly captured by Voyager's magnetometer and plasma wave instruments. At first glance, the recordings look like random fluctuations, but multiple independent teams ran Fourier transforms and pattern recognition analysis on the data. What they found was a recursive harmonic sequence repeating at consistent intervals every 19.7 minutes. Beyond that, the pattern seems self-correcting, gradually sharpening over time, as if compensating for degradation in Voyager's antenna. Natural processes produce noise, not adaptive sequences that improve clarity in response to interference. The implication was either astounding or impossible. Either signals were being mirrored back in a way that actively optimized for reception, or something external was deliberately trying to communicate in a way that could be understood by a deteriorating receiver. This revelation sparked internal alarms. Metadata leaked from the files showed that NASA Anomaly Detection AI, a program with the internal name Serena, tailored to flag non-human logic in transmissions, had marked the sequence as non-natural. Serena's alerts aren't triggered lightly. The system is tuned to recognize patterns inconsistent with random astrophysical processes. When its flag went up, internal classification codes shifted to a higher sensitivity. To many inside those systems, the implication was stark. The signal displayed the hallmarks of purposeful, non-random information. Although Voyager lacks propellant for self-steering, it does have antenna alignment motors and gyroscopes capable of making minor orientation adjustments. On August 1, 2025, amateur space trackers and a handful of observatories monitoring publicly available telemetry noticed a small but statistically significant change in Voyager 1's pointing vector. The probe seemed to have reoriented its transmission beam by a few degrees, an astronomical amount in deep space navigation terms. What made the event perplexing was the direction. Voyager's realignment did not point to where Triai/Atlas had been. Rather, it pointed to where models predicted it would be a few weeks later. It was as if the probe were computing a future position and preemptively aligning itself, like a chess player, predicting an opponent's move. NASA public explanation invoked a network communication glitch with the Deep Space Network. Internally, however, leaked memos suggested something different. The probe had altered orientation before a command sequence was transmitted from Earth. That leaves uncomfortable possibilities. Either Voyager was experiencing a complex, coordinated mechanical malfunction itself, difficult to reconcile with the observed signal adaptations, or the probe had been remotely influenced by an external agency or agent. The idea of remote influence prompted immediate and unsettling concerns regarding control and vulnerability, as well as speculation regarding the kind of natural or artificial entity that might wield such power. While Voyager quietly adjusted its offset in the darkness, Earth-based observatories watching Triai/Atlas reported that behavior. Unlike typical interstellar interlopers that tumble and change brightness due to rotation and outgassing, ATLAs began pulsing with a binary-like light curve, flickering on and off in repeatable cycles that corresponded precisely to the timestamps of Voyager's last known transmission bursts. Worse, telescopes capable of measuring Doppler shifts and trajectory reported a slight but measurable deceleration in ATLA's velocity, not a random slowing associated with outgassing jets, nor the gravitational influence of known bodies. The object appeared to reduce speed in a controlled manner, as if some external influence altered its motion. NASA publicly dismissed these observations as artifacts, parallax errors, instrument noise, or modeling discrepancies. But independent observatories across Europe and South America corroborated the deceleration and pulsing. The implications were significant. If Voyager's realignment was responsible for both the change in velocity and the timing of the pulses, then, for the first recorded instance, an interstellar object had changed its motion and emitted structured signals in temporal registration with a human-made probe's activity. Was this coincidence, causation, or something else entirely? Layered into these events is the strange tale of the Golden Record. As a time capsule from Earth, Voyager famously carries an analog record, containing greetings, music, and images. The Golden Record is regarded by most as a symbolic act. Fewer realize its design included additional metadata and mathematical puzzles embedded into its grooves, details never formally publicized. A team of cryptologists at a European university claims to have discovered an inaudible repeating tone, hidden within the record's Earth sounds track. When isolated and amplified, the tone decodes into a prime number sequence, matching the harmonic pulses it allegedly received from 3i/Atlas. If true, that suggests a possible unintentional handshake, a mathematical signature encoded on Voyager, that by chance or design, corresponds to patterns emanating from the interstellar object. Is there a trigger in the golden record that we never intended to include? And if the object recognized it, was the subsequent response a discovery, a reply, or something more deliberate? Shortly after the interaction spike, Voyager's Deep Space Network telemetry it registered a packet that baffled engineers. The transmission contained a sequence that did not match the probe's original decoding framework. Attempting to parse the packet caused the system to produce outputs in formats far beyond what its onboard software was designed to handle. In plain terms, a probe whose firmware was written to interpret low-bit telemetry suddenly generated outputs in higher bit structures after ingesting the new packet. It was as if the message contained instructions that it increased the capacity of the receivers to interpret them. Technically, it resembled a remote patch delivered via signal rather than hardware. Engineers described the occurrence both accurately and irreverently. Voyager got smarter without anyone physically upgrading it. For machines designed in the 1970s and programmed with the constraints of that era, that was a profound and unsettling observation. It should shock no one that agencies had planned for potential anomalies. A leaked internal presentation from 2018 referenced a hypothetical unclassified policy code named Watcher Protocol. The memo examined scenarios in which older spacecraft receive external contact, begin behaving adaptively, and appear intelligent despite lacking onboard air height. It argued that, if such behavior were detected, the craft should be treated not as inert equipment, but as an active node in an external communication network. Within the margins of the leaked slides, engineers had marked a threshold. A probe should be administratively quarantined and operational access restricted if it begins to exhibit adaptive communication or processing behavior. According to those same leaks, Voyager's status, in the aftermath of the Atlas interaction, was reclassified internally as Watcher Active. It was no longer just a relic at that point. It was a link, possibly between human systems and something else, making things more difficult. The conduct of civilian and semi-public observatories was another factor. Within days of the publicized anomalies, the Allen Telescope Array, a major instrument used for searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, pulled its public feeds and redirected computing resources to a narrow frequency band correlating with Voyager spike. Scheduled maintenance was advertised on the site. National security advisories urged caution in public discussion, according to insiders. The reaction followed a pattern that had been observed prior to the arrival of interstellar visitors, but this time at a greater tempo and scale. Some researchers compared the measures to a targeted electromagnetic drill, designed to prevent runaway signal exchange. Others thought it was an effort to stop a feedback loop that could cause responses to grow beyond control. Regardless of the cause, the blackout fueled speculation that broader containment protocols would be used. A surprising development emerged from Kyoto. A paper was submitted by a university research group that made a change to the traditional monolith hypothesis, the idea that advanced civilizations might distribute passive beacons across interstellar space to be discovered by emerging intelligences. Their research suggested that 3i/Atlas might not be a spacecraft at all, but rather a technological seed, a dormant artifact programmed to activate when a particular signature was found. In that model, Voyager's reorientation wasn't an accident. It was precisely the expected trigger event. According to the Kyoto group, the predicted behavior of a beacon switching from passive to active, upon recognizing a predefined pattern, matches Atlas's slowdown and altered light curve. The implication is chilling. Our oldest probe might have tripped a switch in an interstellar system established long before humanity's rise, and that system, once dormant, could now be awake. Multiple monitoring stations reported radiation anomalies close to Atlas's projected path within a week of the suspected exchange. This was not the spherical cosmic ray background radiation. Every 1.618 seconds, sensors recorded pulse-modulated energy bursts that oscillated at intervals corresponding to the golden ratio. More disturbing was that the energy signature matched, in part, profiles associated with highly unusual events, catalogued only rarely in history, including echoes of the anomalous WOW signal recorded in 1977. Internal procedural updates to satellite shielding and the activation of bioenergetic precautionary assessments were quietly undertaken in the days that followed. Some labs tested to see if biomolecule resonance could theoretically be caused by prolonged exposure to those waveforms. The tests were precautionary and the results inconclusive. But the fact that such screenings occurred at all raised the classification to a level reserved for potential extraterrestrial biological concerns. The episode's social fallout was immediate and unnerving. Researchers who discussed the anomaly openly online found posts deleted, profiles scrubbed, and data repositories removed. An astronomer who uploaded a spectral reconstruction reported receiving a call from a person claiming affiliation with the Deep Space Network, who then revealed personal details about the astronomer's family. The message was made clear: do not publicize this finding. The coordinated suppression of analysis and commentary, internally nicknamed the shadow sweep, involved multiple agencies cooperating to remove public traces and discourage open-source investigation. Attempts to stamp out discussion only amplified suspicion and motivated some communities to mirror data and host it on distributed platforms. Curious minds created new archives and shared screenshots, even as deletion waves swept through forums, rendering complete deletion virtually impossible. The unease was exacerbated by pattern recognition. Every time a new technical paper or public data release discussed Atlas's structure or Voyager's vector, the interstellar object altered its spin rate or light profile, often within hours. The correlation was too consistent to dismiss. Some researchers proposed a radical hypothesis. Atlas does more than just detect electrical power. It reads the informational content of transmissions and reacts to awareness itself. It does more than monitor raw signals. It is aware of the fact that it's being observed. If this is true, it suggests a feedback mechanism that reflects or responds to observers, a probe that adapts to the intelligence of the entity it is studying. 3 days before the most recent dataset, Atlas made a significant maneuver, changing its angular velocity, which put it on an intercept trajectory toward a place behind Neptune that was once thought to be irrelevant. At roughly the same time, Voyager 1 adjusted its antenna array to point toward that same quadrant, a rare intentional alignment between an interstellar object and a human-made relic. Whether those adjustments were causal or coincidental remains disputed, but the logs indicate both bodies became synchronized in pulse interval and projected path, effectively locking into what some scientists now call a contact corridor. Two ancient travelers, one from Earth and one from elsewhere, are moving in harmony toward a destination we do not yet understand. A system might already be ready for their arrival somewhere out there. It's simple and terrifying to imagine Voyager 1 as a lonely artifact drifting at the edge of the known. But what if instead, Voyager was never merely a floating postcard? What if it was embedded, whether intentionally or not, in a network of signals from other galaxies that awaited our arrival? The abrupt reprogramming, the mirrored pulses, and the impossible course changes suggest something planned and purposeful when taken together. This goal might be to find something. It might be communication. Or it could be a warning, as a few analysts have warned in whispers. Consider the possibility that the structured pulses were not a greeting, but a countdown, a deliberate sign that a process has begun and will end at a specific point. If that were the case, the immediate inquiry would shift from what 3II/Atlas is to what occurs at the conclusion of the countdown. Are we looking at a beacon designed to awaken systems across a volume of space at a certain trigger? Are we looking at an automated defense protocol that responds to attempts at contact? Or is this a test that a far-off intelligence uses to gauge our responses and readiness? With the limited data at our disposal, none of these options is reassuring, and none of them can be fully validated. There are 3 broad categories of evidence that have been gathered thus far. First, physical telemetry changes in Voyager's orientation, Atlas's pulse-like curve, and measurable decelerations in the object's motion. Second, signal analysis, the anomalous packet that effectively altered Voyager's decoding outputs, and the periodic self-correcting harmonic sequences recorded and flagged by anomaly detection systems. Third, the socio-technical response, coordinated censorship, institutional protocols like Watcha, and extraordinary security measures taken by observatories and research establishments. Each alone might be explainable. Together, they form a mosaic that resists casual dismissal. To be clear, there are rational, non-mysterious explanations proposed by cautious analysts. Instrument, it. Artifacts, miscalibrations, and computational overfitting can create convincing but spurious patterns. Social dynamics and bureaucratic caution can appear like censorship, even when driven by legal mandates or data sensitivity. And the human mind is wired to see patterns and agency, sometimes where none exist. Reliable scientists insist on rigor, publish raw data, replicate findings, and invite the public to validate analysis. But this crisis in transparency only deepens the mystery. When many teams report similar anomalies independently, the probability of collective error diminishes. If Voyager 1 did interact with an interstellar object, and the exchange was non-trivial, what comes next matters. At minimum, we should expect intensified scrutiny from both scientific and security institutions. Observation campaigns will multiply, frequency bands will tighten, and more resources will be directed toward tracking trajectories and decoding pulses. The chance to study a reactive, interstellar body is unprecedented. The temptation to weaponize knowledge, or to quiet the conversation for fear of panic, is likewise enormous. For many years to come, public perception will be shaped by how institutions strike a balance between openness and caution. There's a deeper philosophical question, too. If a mathematical signature embedded in a human-made probe can activate an interstellar artifact, then the cosmos contains mechanisms designed to respond to detectable intelligence. That alters our place in the universe, both scientifically and culturally. For millennia, our myths and monuments have hinted at visitors, gods, strange lights, maps, paths, and events that can be tracked by modern instruments. If those stories encoded empirical memories, the fields of anthropology, astronomy, and archaeology are coming together in a novel way for humanity. We may find, in stone and song, guidance for navigating an encounter we never anticipated. None of this is tidy, or conclusive. The safest scientific posture is humility. Our data are limited, our models incomplete, and our biases vivid. However, attention must be paid to the social and literal signals. If Voyager 1 did become an active node in conversation with an interstellar system, then the probe's silence is no longer passive. It is a voice we must learn to interpret. If 3I/Atlas is a passive rock, then why did it slow and pulse? If it's an inert object, why did its behavior correlate with human observation and telemetry changes? If it's a beacon or seed, who placed it and why? If it's a sentient probe, what does it want, and what are its constraints? The situation is moving right now. Telemetry continues to trickle in. Observatories compete for attention. Scientific organizations and governments meet in closed rooms to decide between risk and release. There are public datasets, private datasets, and datasets that leak into encrypted caches. We can be certain of one thing. Numerous researchers' perspectives on interstellar contact have already been altered by the occurrence. The possibility that contact could be indirect, mediated through singular artifacts and ancient triggers, reframes the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in ways few anticipated a decade ago. And then there's the darkest, most human fear. That what returned to Voyager was not a hello, but a warning, a countdown, or a test. If the pulses correlate to a sequence with future significance, time matters. If they signal a process that develops over decades or centuries, then we stand at the opening act of a story whose ending is unknown. Active data collection, in conjunction with patient curiosity, is the most responsible response. We must observe, replicate, and share. We must protect the probe and our assets from runaway feedback loops. We must resist the urge to conflate intrigue with certainty. Voyager 1 was launched as an act of hopeful outreach, a golden disc full of sound. And science sent on a journey with an optimistic greeting from a young technological species. The outcomes are now unfolding in ways that combine wonder and risk. If that act accidentally sparked the awakening of an interstellar system, the encounter is a turning point in history, regardless of whether 3I/Atlas is a beacon, a probe, or something entirely different. We have, for the first time, an ancient human artifact and an extraterrestrial object behaving in concert. And that duet demands our best science, our clearest ethics, and our calmest public discourse. The stars have always been there, far away and indifferent. Something in the cold dark may have looked back with a pattern and an intention for the first time in recorded history. Additionally, we have evidence, albeit insufficient, that it answered. It's possible that the words it said are still unclear to us. It could be a warning, a test, or a signal, but the fact that it is speaking at all forces a profound question. Onto the global stage. Are we ready to listen carefully, to learn, and to act wisely? The stakes are no longer merely academic. They are existential, cultural, and profoundly human. The story is still being written. New telemetry will arrive. There will be debate and publication of papers. Some voices will call for transparency. Others will urge restraint. But one fact is clear. A 48-year-old probe and an interstellar visitor have intersected in ways we did not predict. The consequences of that intersection are now rippling through observatories, mission control rooms, and the ancient stones of civilizations long past. Humanity has sent a message on a physical medium into the void. Additionally, the void has responded in turn. We must respond to it with rigor, humility, and resolve, regardless of whether it is a friend, foe, mirror, or message. The universe just became a little less anonymous, and that changes everything.